Welcome to today's Vaxa Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast. Today I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Matt Ort. Matt, welcome back.
Happy to be here, Toddles.
And mate, where are you today? Tell me.
I am sitting in the Marriott hotel room in Waikiki Beach.
Oh, terrible life. Terrible life. It's got to be better than the 16 degrees and windy here in Brisbane. But thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule, mate. We've got some really important things to talk about, but none more than how private equity and venture capital can play a big part in ensuring that the right infrastructure, especially in Australia, is built to assist with defence, national security and regional security.
Yeah, I mean, I think now is a super important time, right? We've determined that there's going to be a lot of activity in the north of Australia, and there's a lot of bases up there that need a little bit of TLC. And I think the fastest way to do that and the most efficient way to do that is with private equity.
And Matt, obviously being based in the US and with a long history involved with defence, can you just shed some light on how the US have been undertaking such programs as well? What might be coming up for the US and how they do it, and how Australia could learn from that model?
Yeah, one good example is a company called Capt, right? And Capt is taking advantage of government-created opportunity zones where they invest and then are granted tax benefits based on the requirements for the opportunity zones. And they're going to use that to build probably the most advanced shipyard in the world.
Wow. Obviously, maritime and the maritime domain is your expertise, having been a senior officer in the US Navy and a diplomat as well. Tell me the importance of maritime in Australia, given especially the Australian Defence Review, and our strategy is now no longer a strategy of deterrence, but a strategy of denial. How important is infrastructure like shipyards in Australia?
Well, you talk about the maritime, right? And I think obviously, Australia's an island, so you're surrounded by water. So I think that the maritime aspect is important, but I also don't want to lose focus on like the bear bases up there, right? The bear bases arguably are just as important for whether there's missile defense or power projection. I think the bear bases are another opportunity to use that private equity model to get it done quicker, right? Because if you wait for the government to do it, you're talking, there's supposedly no new money in Australia till 2025, and then you've got submarines, and then you've got hypersonics, and what are you going to use, and how fast is it going to happen when you've got to refurbish those bases and all the infrastructure associated with it? Right?
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously we talk about how we engage with our number one ally, being the US, to enhance that infrastructure here in Australia. Until recently, it's been impossible for American companies or organisations to build infrastructure here in Australia, but we're seeing more of that now, and especially with US capital. But importantly, and there's been a lot of news here in Australia recently about the $30 billion that we have under management in the Australian private equity and venture capital markets. It's a lot of money. Just how quickly that could go to enhancing and standing up critical infrastructure here in Australia. Companies like Capt, as you mentioned, Salus, Sprint Venture Capital as well, all these organisations. How do you think that they should get involved with things like the capability accelerators to make this happen?
Yeah, that's a tougher one when you talk about getting them involved in the actual capabilities. But I guess one benefit of it is going to be, your acquisition model is not. It's different than ours, but it's not so dissimilar in that by the time you just think you want to acquire something to the time you field it, it's already 3 generations obsolete, right? And so leveraging private equity to, kind of turn the wheels faster, hopefully get the warfighter that gear that they need earlier, and at least the current generation, if not maybe the second generation, than what they ordered, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Navy bases, dockyards, bear bases, what else should we be looking at to build here, using and partnering with private equity and venture capital to meet the strategies that we've set forth?
Well, I mean, the technologies that are going to be behind hypersonics, counter hypersonics, AI. The tricky part is, though, you've got to convince the companies that are out there that the money is going to be there if they're doing the work, right? And so I think that's where we got to figure out where the gap is, right? Because how many small businesses go out of business every year because they had an idea that somebody liked, but the government didn't end up buying it. So it was a great idea. They got all the indicators, and then it didn't get purchased, right? And then they go out of business. So we've got to leverage that. And I'm not 100% sure the way to go on that, right? There's definitely smarter folks out there than me that can drive that. But the point is, if they're driving, if they're able to push the bus, so to speak, we might be able to push it faster. If they're expecting some kind of return on their investment, right?
Sure, of course, and that's what it's all about. Improving capability and the return on investment for the investor. Matt, obviously, we're in the business of helping US organisations into the Australian market and Australian organisations into the US market, along with other bits and pieces. But you look at what the latest strategy and review sets out, and that's additional logistics centres and capacity, additional fuel holding, storage and distribution capacity, and an improved health capability and protective measures. They're obviously all integral in supporting not only the warfighter, but that active deterrence as well. These would obviously be of appetite to US organisations to get involved with, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I think the US would be certainly keen to increase Australia's capability in the region, because we're gonna be leaning on Australia pretty heavily in any kind of contested environment, right? In the Indo-Pacific. I think we still have a long way to go as far as technology sharing, classification. I think there's going to be a lot of primes that aren't permitted to do a lot of the things we'd like to do together cooperatively that we just can't do right now, because that hasn't been worked out. We haven't figured out how we can best protect that information and share it. And that's going to be another barrier for the VC and private equity to come into the market, right? If you're talking crop from one country to another, right? Probably a bigger problem coming from the U.S. to Australia, but I think another thing we got to do is convince some of these bigger primes and companies to take a more of a long-term look, especially for some of the infrastructure plays, right? Because if we don't get this stuff right early on, and especially for the AUKUS, the sub bases, the hypersonics, counter hypersonics, I know we kind of keep falling back to that. But if we're not able to do that and do it right from good hardened locations, we're not going to succeed. And so getting these companies to invest into some of that infrastructure, taking the long-term play in that, well, if the countries are more stable and the economies are more stable because we've got the backing of defense and we have a plan, then that's going to be also factored in my return on investment over the course of whatever the terms are that are negotiated, right?
Yeah, certainly. So you mentioned a few of the organisations there, Matt. I know you've been on the road a lot in the US at many forums and meeting with many leaders. Is there genuine appetite for US private equity, US venture to invest into the Australian market? Because as you mentioned earlier, this market's drying up. There's not a great deal of cash until 2025, unless you're patient and know where to look. Also, I guess that return on investment for organisations investing out here in Australia. But what's the genuine appetite like?
I think there's a huge appetite, right? I think I was just on a panel at ASPE last week where we kind of spoke about this, and there was a lot of keen interest around the table for folks representing different private equity or VC firms that are keen to get into the market. It's just the right outreach. We have to have the right outreach from the respective governments. From Australia to the U.S. to you got to give them some confidence that coming in that there's going to be good, at least a return, right? Whatever the return is expected to be, we get somewhere. Without the confidence, it's going to be harder to attract those big firms to spend the money there, right?
Certainly. And I guess also, other than infrastructure, advanced technology. So the Australian government has now launched the Australian Strategic Capability Accelerator, which under the National Defence Strategy is looking for innovation in the asymmetric capability sphere, looking for emerging and disruptive technology. There's obviously a lot of that in the US. You guys have been working on that for a lot longer than we have, and have had the need to use it as well. I guess from a from an investment point of view here in Australia as well, the ESV CLP provides additional tax credits. It used to be from 10% up to 100% now for defence technology enterprises, making capital losses claimable. That's obviously going to be another attractive carrot, you would say, for investors. Either way as well, the Australian government have just recently, over the last 5 days, they've advertised the fact that they're reaching out and they want to partner with venture capital firms and like the likes of Sprint Venture Capital, Salus, so on and so forth, to back local Australian companies into not just infrastructure but also technology as well. The fund, as mentioned, there's only $30 billion under management here that's really available, whereas in the US, that pie's got to be a lot greater.
Conversations have just really started kicking into full gear between the representatives of the countries about specifically private equity and venture capital, and I think right now we're moving in the right direction in the U.S. at least. With, like I said, Capt and some shipbuilding, and also more modernization of our shipyards and our shipbuilding industrial base. We're using organizations like BENS, the Business Executives for National Security, to help us figure out how best to leverage that private equity and those venture capital markets in building up our industrial base, especially specifically for shipbuilding.
Yeah. Okay. Mate, do we want to talk? Sorry, obviously we can edit this, mate. Obviously, do we want to talk about any of the? Just thinking here about the cell. Do we want to talk about any of the other work you're doing, like in BENS and stuff, or leave that out?
Leave it out for now.
Yeah.
We can do another conversation. I mean, it would be a worthy show, maybe just to talk about how an organization like BENS could, and maybe with some BENS executives, a BENS like organization could benefit Australia. The non-for-profit kind of business model, where we can go in realizing that they're getting the best experts in all the industries that whatever BENS like organization can muster. There's nobody sacking the deck saying, well, you got to use this technology, right? You're just getting the best minds saying, this is a solution that you need to find, and then ultimately the government makes the call on whether to use it or not. I mean, that would be a worthy show.
Matt, that was really insightful information. Really appreciate your insights there, and especially your recent experiences in the US and dealing with these private equity firms and venture capital firms looking to get into the Australian market. All right, mate, we'll talk soon.
See ya.
See you, buddy.